Mantras of our Divine Mother. Our Divine Mother says, be ever one-pointed in your surrender and sincere in your aspiration. You will constantly feel the presence of the Divine's help and guidance. With always our love and blessings, says our Divine Mother. Sri Aurobindo Savitri. Book 1, The Book of Beginnings, Canto 3, The Yoga of the Soul's Release, page 44, new stanza. Oft inspiration, with her lightning feet, a sudden messenger from the all-seeing tops, traverse the soundless corridors of his mind, bringing her rhythmic sense of hidden things. A music spoke, transcending mortal speech, as if from a golden peal of the all-bliss, a joy of light, a joy of sudden sight, a rapture of the thrilled, undying word, poured into his heart as into an empty cup, a repetition of God's first delight, creating in a young and virgin time. In a brief moment, caught a little space, all knowledge packed into great wordless thoughts, lodged in the expectant stillness of his depths, a crystal of the ultimate absolute, a portion of the inexpressible truth, revealed by silence to the silent soul. The intense creatrix in his stillness wrought. Her power, fallen speechless, grew more intimate. She looked upon the seen and the unforeseen, unguessed domains. She made her native feel. Words of our Lord Sri Aurobindo, taken from the collective works of our Lord Sri Aurobindo, SABCL, book The Mother with Letters, continuation of the working of the Mother's force, subtopic continuation of descent and working of the Divine Mother's force. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the power of the Divine Mother from above is descending upon you, and the pressure you feel on your head and the workings of which you are aware are hers. Put yourself completely into her hands, have the entire confidence, observe carefully and accurately all that happens and write that here. There is no need of special instructions since what is needed is being done for you. The first pressure was on your mind. The centers of the mind are the head and above it, the center of the forehead between the eyes, the throat and the vital, mental, emotional and sensational mind centers from the breast downward. It is later which is the first prana of which you become aware. The action of the power was to widen these two parts of you and raise them up towards the lower centers of the higher consciousness above your head so that Hereafter, they might both be consciously governed from there, and these might both move in a wide, universal consciousness not limited by the body. The other prana, the restless of which you become aware of, is the vital, the being of desire and life moment. The work of the power has been directed towards quieting the restless movements and making it wide in consciousness as with the mind. The large body you felt was the vital body, not the physical sthula sarira. The basis of our sadhana must be silence and quiet. You must grow always more and more deeply quiet, still both in yourself and in your attitude to the world around you. If you can do this, the sadhana is likely to go on progressing and enlarging itself with a minimum of trouble and disturbance. Go on quietly, trusting to the power that is working in you. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo continues to say, this weight or pressure on the head is always the sign that the Divine Mother's force is in contact with you and pressing from above to envelop your being and enter your being and pervade it, usually by degrees through the centers on its way downward. Sometimes it comes first as peace, sometimes as force, sometimes as the Divine Mother's consciousness and her presence, sometimes as Ananda. When you lost it before, you must have been due either to some uprising of the vital imperfections in yourself or an attack from outside. Of course, the pressure need not always be there. But if things take the ordinary course, it usually recurs or else continues until the being is open and there is no further obstacle to the descent of the higher consciousness. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, it is the descent of the Divine Mother's force from above through the spinal cord. It is a well-known moment. There are 2 or 3 kinds of descent. One is this touching the base of the centers, which rest on the spinal cord. Another is through the head into the body, going from level to level till the whole body is filled and opening all centers of consciousness. Another is the descent enveloping the body from outside. What the mother did was to light the fire within. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, what the Divine Mother did was to light the fire within. If you did not feel it, it must be because the outer covering has not yet allowed it to come through into the outer consciousness. But something in the inner being must have kept it and open more widely. That is shown by your experience in sleep, for that was evidently an action of the Divine Mother in the inner being. The descent of the current in the spine is always a descent of the Divine Mother's force working in the centers to open them, and the strong force of the current you feel is an evident proof that the wider opening is there. You have only to persist, and the effect both of the fire and the force will come out in the surface consciousness, for always there is a preparatory work behind the wheel in the inner being before the wheel thins and disappears, and all the working can be done with the participation of the outer consciousness. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo continues to say, something is growing in you. Something is growing in you, but it is all inside. Still, if there is the steady persistence, it is bound to come out. For instance, this white dazzling light With currents, it is a sure sign of the force of the Divine Mother entering and working in the being, but it came to you in sleep, that is to say, in the inner being, still behind the veil. The moment it came out, the dryness would disappear. Question: since the beginning, the working of the divine force has begun. During the evening darshan of the Divine Mother, my consciousness opened itself before her more widely than ever before. For this, our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, very good. The force usually works in that way, that with interruptions and returns, growing each time stronger and fuller. Next subtopic: oneness with the Mother's universal consciousness. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the consciousness of the mind, life and body in each person is ordinarily shut up in itself. It is narrow, not wide, sees itself as the center of the being, judges all things according to its own impressions. It does not know anything as it really is. But when by integral yoga one begins to open to the true consciousness, then this barrier begins to break down. One feels the mind grow wider. Even in the end, the physical consciousness grows wider and wider until you feel all things in yourself one with all things. You then become one with the Divine Mother's universal consciousness. You then become one with the Divine Mother's universal consciousness. That is why you feel the mind becoming wide. But also, there is much above the human mind. It is this which you feel like a world above the head. But there is much above the human mind. It is this which you feel like a world above your head. All these are the ordinary experiences of our integral yoga. It is only a beginning. But in order that it may go on developing, you must become more and more quiet, more and more able to hold whatever comes without getting too eager and excited. Peace and calmness are the first thing, and with it, wideness. In the peace, you can bear whatever love or ananda comes, whatever strength comes, or whatever knowledge. The Mother's force and the gunas. Question: when one feels the Mother's force acting through him and not his own, is it the Mother's force alone that works in his actions and the gunas remain quiescent? For this, our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, the gunas are there. The gunas are there and not quiescent, for they are in the intermediate zone. If the force of the divine and the inner consciousness are very strong, then there is a tendency for the rajas to become like some inferior form of tapas, and the tamas to become more like a kind of inert sama. That is how the transformation begins, but it is usually very slow in its process. Question: what is then to be said that the material is ready for the divine? For this, our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, if the material consciousness is open, feels the Mother's force working in it and responds, then it is ready. Mother's consciousness can be there in all the atoms of the body, since all is secretly conscious. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, for the Divine Mother's force to work fully in the body itself, and not only the mind, must have faith and be open to the Divine Mother. Mother's influence on the subconscient and the environment. Question: since morning, I was having intense aspiration to get lost in the Mother's consciousness, Then I felt my consciousness frequently rising and stationing itself above. Before pranam, I felt as if even the parts near the navel and below are being drawn upwards. After pranam, I experienced for some time a different kind of atmosphere almost concretely around me. So I imagined that the mother may have put a strong spiritual influence on my subconscient and environmental consciousness. For this, our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, it is very good. You're right about the subconscient and the environmental. For it is there that the influence must fall so that the consciousness may go upward and spread itself out widely in a free space, in a free peace, light and joy, connecting them down to the subconscient with a higher consciousness. It is then that the loss of the ego in the mother's consciousness becomes possible. Assimilation of the Divine Mother's force. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, as for the Divine Mother's force, when one receives it, the best way is to be quiet till it is assimilated. Afterwards, it is all right, not lost by outward being or mixing. If the meditation brings poise, peace, a concentrated condition, or even a pressure or influence that can go on in the work, provided one does not throw it away by a relaxed or dispersed state of consciousness. That was why the mother wanted people not to be concentrated at pranam or meditation, but to remain silent and absorb or assimilate afterwards, and also insisted on avoiding things that relax or disperse or dissipate too much, precisely for this reason, that so the effects of what she put in them might continue and the change of attitude will take place. But I am afraid most of the sadhaks have never understood or practiced anything of the kind. They could not appreciate or understand her directions. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, allow a quiet and steady will to progress, to be settled in you. Learn the habit of a silent, persistent and thorough assimilation of what the Divine Mother puts into you. This is the sound way to advance. When one is open and too eager and tries to pull down the mother's force and experience, instead of letting it descend quietly, that is called pulling. Many people pull at the mother's force, trying to take more than they can easily assimilate and disturb the working. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, sometimes things like headache becomes very possible because the brain either tried too much or does not want to receive or make difficulties. But the yogic headaches are of a special kind, and after the brain has found out the way to receive or respond, they don't come at all, says our Lord Sri Aurobindo. Next subtopic, psychic opening to the Divine Mother's force. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, what is needed is to profit by the discovery and get rid of the impediment. The mother did not merely point out the impediment, she showed you very expressly how to get rid of it and at what time. You understand her, though now at the time of writing your letter to me, the light which you saw seems to have been clouded by your indulging your vital more and more in the bitter pastime of sadness. That was quite natural, for that is the result sadness always does bring. It is the reason why I object to the gospel of sorrow and to any sadhana which makes sorrow one of its main planks, abhimana, revolt or viraha. For sorrow is not, as Spinoza pointed out, a passage to a greater perfection, a way to siddhi. It cannot be, for it confuses and weakens and distracts the mind, depresses the vital force, darkens the spirit. A relapse from joy and vital elasticity and ananda to sorrow, self distrust, despondency, and weakness is a recoil from a greater to a lesser consciousness. The habit of these moods show a clinging of something in the vital to the smaller, obscurer, dark, and distressed moment out of which it is the very aim of yoga to rise. It is therefore quite incorrect, says our Lord, to say that the Divine Mother took away the wrong key with which you were trying to open the fiery palace and left you with none at all. For she not only showed you the true key but gave it to you. It was not a mere vague exhortation to cheerfulness she gave you, but she described exactly the condition felt in the right kind of meditation, a state of inner rest, not of straining, of quiet opening, not of eager or desperate pulling, a harmonious giving of oneself to the divine force for its working, and in that quietude, a sense of the Divine Mother's force working, and a restful confidence, allowing it to act without any unquiet interference. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo continues to say, and she asked you if you had not experienced that condition, and you said you had and knew it very well. Now that condition is the beginning of the psychic opening. And if you have had it, if you know what the psychic opening is, there is of course much more afterwards that comes to complete it. But this is the fundamental condition into which all the rest can most easily come. What you should have done was to keep the key the Mother gave you present in your consciousness and apply it, not to go back and allow sadness and the repining view of the past to grow upon you. In this condition, which we term the right or the psychic attitude, they may and will be called prayer, aspiration, intensity, concentration will come of themselves, not by a hard effort or a tense strain on the nature. Rejection of the wrong moments, frank confession of the defects, frank confession of defects are not only not incompatible but helpful to it. But this attitude makes the rejection, the confession easy, spontaneous, entirely complete and sincere and effective. That is the experience of all who have consented to take this attitude. Our Lord Sri Aurobindo says, I may say in passing that consciousness and receptivity are not the same things. Consciousness and receptivity are not the same things. One may be receptive, yet extremely unaware of how things are being done and of what is being done. The force works, and as I have repeatedly written, behind the wheel. The results remain packed behind and come out afterwards, often slowly, little by little, until there is so much pressure that it breaks through somehow and forces itself upon the external nature. There lies the difference between a mental and vital straining and pulling and a spontaneous psychic openness. It is not at all the first time that we have spoken of the difference. The Mother and myself have written and spoken of it times without number, and we have deprecated pulling and straining and advocated the attitude of the psychic openness. It is not really a question of the right or the wrong key, but of putting the key in the lock in the right way or in the wrong way. Because of some difficulty, you try to force the lock, turning the key this way and that way with violence or confidentially. The mother and myself have written and spoken of it times without number, and we have deprecated pulling and straining and advocated the attitude of the psychic oneness and openness. It is not really a question of the right or the wrong key, but of putting the key in the lock in the right or the wrong way. Either because of some difficulty, you try to force the lock, turning the key this way and that with violence, or confidently and quietly give it the right turn and the door opens. Question. My mind was trying to become conscious of the mother's thoughts and to receive them. Is it the right activity? For this, our Lord Sri Aurobindo says it's not altogether the way. The mind is active. If the mind is active, it is more difficult to become aware of what the mother is bringing. It is not thoughts she brings, but the higher light and force. She does it every time. Only today, you not only recede by consciously being receptive,